Hello, David McMillan here, and those of you with long memories might recall that Shaun Attwood and I did a kind of coronavirus report. It was a weekly 1 hour gab fest, and I think I kept about 7 or 8 of them and strung them together as one-to-one, and that's on my channel. I'll put a link on here somewhere. I wanted to resume the series, but not with Shaun. He's a London-based activist. Let's not forget that. But the real point was to find somebody who wasn't just on my side. I asked Robbie Strong, an old friend of mine, to come along for the ride on this one, and we'll see what we get out of it. There are a few things to know from an alternative perspective. Anyway, enough from me, and more from both of us. Well, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. David McMillan here, and some of you who remember things they probably should try to forget might recall that with Shaun Attwood, I did a series which I think was called Coronavirus Report or Alternative Coronavirus. We did about 10 of them, and they're on my channel. And, well, they were supposed to be a slightly different take from his point of view and mine on the social pressures and the legal ramifications, I guess, that were coming at the time. Well, Shaun's, he's moved on to other things at the time, but people quite fondly remember those little calls and sessions. So I thought to myself, well, really, I'd like to bring them back. But instead of having somebody really from my world, I thought, why not go with a friend of mine who has never been a criminal, well, not that he admits to me, and if anything, perhaps, even if indirectly, has more been the victim of things. But the point is, Robbie Strong has had an interesting life, a wide life, travelled the world, and knows London like a black cab driver, the vehicle, and really is a keen observer of things. So I thought, instead of being mired in the criminal world, let's get a bit of reality into it from somebody a little younger than myself. And welcome, Robbie. Do you wonder why you're here?
Yes, no, it's marvellous to be here. No, thank you very much, sir. Yes. I think you've overstated my innocence, but no, I appreciate that nonetheless.
I have to ask straight away, how are you finding the lockdown experience? Though you have a day job, I believe, which makes it essential.
Yes, no, it's been interesting. What are we on now? Lockdown 3.6.
Yeah.
Thing. Ups and downs, but I'm surviving. I'm metabolizing oxygen. I'm doing the best I can. I'm getting through. But yes, I'm fine, sir.
You said metabolizing oxygen, did you?
I'm doing my best. Yeah.
Well, we used to have a kind of curse for people we didn't like, referring to them as oxygen wasters, which was probably a bit cruel. But are you? Do you have any flatmates or friends that have kind of been locked down for any period of time?
I mean, I've been one of the lucky ones, really. I've actually moved back with my mum for this part of the lockdown, because everyone I lived with was just like London being what it is and being so expensive. Everyone kind of went their own separate ways, and not many people are scrambling around looking for flats at the minute. So I'm lucky enough that my mum just lives not too far from where I was based. So I hopped across there. But a lot of people have been, like, a lot of people in my circle have been really hit by the lockdown and just furloughed, but then jobs being let go and really struggling.
Have they had undergone any personality changes that you've noticed?
Well, to be honest, sir, I've not really had any contact with people, and I've not done a great deal of Zooming or Skyping either. So you'll have to guide me through this expertly.
Well, I was going to suggest that it seems to me we're um, as we're having this call, it's Boris has been making announcements of nothing, saying he doesn't know, and schools won't be back until well after March, and other businesses may, who knows. So this will be, mid or spring, heading towards summer. It's going to be. Do you think there'll be kind of a rebelliousness that'll come in with spring?
I mean, it could go a number of ways, really, couldn't it? It just seems so far since that the 5 days of Christmas with which we were so heartily promised. Yeah, I mean, it could go a number of ways. I think people are fed up, definitely, with how things have played out now. I think people's patience has run thin, and we see with Boris and the government, it seems like they're kind of upping the stakes a bit as well. And I noticed watching the news, there's even more doom and gloom than normal. I think when the weather turns, it's so much colder now, it seems people are a lot more unhappy. I think when spring comes out, there will be a bit more optimism. Hopefully the vaccine will continue to be rolled out at a good pace, and then we can start to get back to...
That's the thing, of course, this much promised vaccine, which is not entirely clear whether it actually stops you spreading it anyway, so that's an issue. But they're squabbling in Europe at the moment about supplies and who gets them. And of course, for the poor people of the world, but we try not to mention them, and African continent and so on, they're getting bugger all. So that won't happen for a while. But I think my feeling is that the vaccine supplies will dry up in inverse proportion to these places that are springing up. I've seen 2 churches. I was going to say a morgue, not really. They haven't used that. A morgue.
It'd be quite macabre if that was where they were rolling it out.
A DI. I mean, what kind of novelty vaccine scent? Have you thought of? Because you work in a upmarket sandwich shop. Do you think?
Yes.
You could do vaccines at a table on the side there.
I mean, we've not offered up our services just yet, and in fairness, we've only got about 10 square foot, so I don't think we could vaccinate people at a great rate there. But yeah, I heard is it Wembley Stadium doing that, or is it just a place in Wembley? Have I made it up? But I know
no, I mean there's someplace. I know there's a DIY centre somewhere on the edge.
I like the idea of being Wembley Stadium though, maybe on the pitch or something. I think that would get a lot of.
I think that was an absolute lie that I started spreading 3 days ago.
Was it you? Okay.
Though I don't know whether you get bothered by these, but I get regular weekend texts from Joe and Tony selling their wares. They're the sort of, I don't know, what would you call it, a state variant of the Albanian dealers, who deliver 24/7 bang and shine. And I'm pretty sure, if I've read their message properly, that they've got Bang and Vac coming up. So It looks like Joe and Tony are going into the vaccine business or thinking of it. You'd know because I bet you don't know, and nobody would. I had to look it up. What how all drugs and medicines get a proprietary name. Like ephedrine is Sudafed or something, isn't it, for example?
Okay.
And the Pfizer vaccine, it's got its own proprietary copyright name, and it doesn't even sound vaguely Western. It's Comirnaty. Believe it or not, that's the name of the stuff.
Sounds like a Middle Eastern spice or something like that, yeah. I mean, if they want people to take it, they could try and go more down the sexy route, as opposed to giving one quite, odd/nebulous name and then calling it something else, like, I don't know, Sexy Smarties or something like that. Just give it something to get it pop or something.
Yeah, like Viragain. Viragon. There is some kind of odd trade names for household cures of things like that. I always thought Bonjela was a really misleading name for a pain relief thing. It seems
very apt advertising either,
Yeah,
does
it's some kind of dessert that you'd put in a packet and it comes out like jelly or something like that. Um,
have you been offered the vaccine at all?
what, on the black market?
Oh, okay, just purely on the not through official channels or anything yet.
No, I had a couple of feelers were put out by scoundrels I know, but I also know they haven't got it. They're like, oh, I don't know, like the guy you run into down in the 24/7 shop on the estate, you know, where the high rises in Clapham. You can ask him at midnight what he's got, and he's got everything, but in fact he has nothing. He has a journey for you up and down the stairs. You know how you can pick the dealers there, or their runners anyway. They've got a kind of jangling pocket. You think it's a key or a gun, but it's not. It's one of those keys that opens the electronic doors in those big flats. It's a fire key. Firemen have it, and it's a long rod with a kind of twist on it, because that's their place of business. You know, you can go up there on the 10th floor and find 7 or 8 people, in the stairwell, kind of minding their own business, until finally, to break the tension, somebody says, "When the hell did he say it was coming anyway?" And then a little conversation opens up. But so nobody you know has actually gone off the rails then?
I think you see these like daily updates on Twitter and people struggling with their, a lot of people, it seems very fashionable now for people to reach out and say they're struggling with their mental health and things like that. But I've not known anyone, strip down to their pants and start living as a toad in the middle of a car park or anything. Like, it's been fairly, I think people have been, bemoaning the situation, but I've not known of anyone completely
Right.
around the bend. I've heard a lot of people leaving, but
sorry, you've heard of?
So I've like a lot of people have been like kind of vacating the big cities and things like that, and so making big life
those
choices.
who can do, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But
I think I mentioned to you a few months ago that I've been working doing kind of everything from electricals to plumbing in a section that deals with people living together, sharing accommodation. I've noticed at those places that only the riffraff are left. The ones that had anything have gone to the Cotswolds, where mum and dad had something or other. Put it this way: the few amongst them have had cars, and the ones that are remaining, they have gone a bit ratty. There's a lot of flat share vandalism, getting a lot of call-outs for things that are clearly internal damage, wrecking an oven or a washing machine. And you get some guy, one of the tenants, standing there saying, "Well, of course, I knew that machine would break using it at 3 o'clock in the fucking morning. I'm not surprised something went wrong with it." Well, that's true.
I suppose there's people that have got no outdoor space as well. I do feel for the, you see these people cooped up with 4 kids in a high-rise flat, tiny balcony if they're lucky, and they've just like when they were saying all this cobblers at the beginning, like we're all in it together, and it's like, and it's the same for everyone. It doesn't discriminate, but it does discriminate, because if you've got a lovely big, Chelsea pad with a nice big open space and plenty of spare rooms, it's going to be a fundamentally different experience to someone who's, in a big flat share or something. Or if you don't like your flats, you're not living with people you choose to live with, or you're in a big high rise or something like that. It's been, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay, sure, that'd be better. But do you think for people who are kind of isolating themselves, the fact that all of their communications with the world are, how many people watch regular TV? Not many. So they're getting their input from kind of scratchy YouTube, Facebook feeds, that kind of stuff, and their twitchy friends who also get on WhatsApp video, or you can do it on Gmail too now. You can click something and you're in front of them. But that to me, it takes on the look of a little mini production. So, was that a real conversation I had, or was that just part of the feed? I mean,
Yeah.
do you think this has dissociative effects, or what?
I mean, the fact is we're communal beasts, aren't we? When we're not designed for intense levels of isolation. So, I'm sure for those for some people that have had very minimal contact, it probably is going to turn them a bit, isn't it? Like
Mm.
we're just really
Have you
not
noticed?
designed.
Sorry.
We're just really not designed for this, are they? It's
Oh, very
I,
far from hunting and gathering.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we're supposed to be on the plains and lobbing spears and taking things down, as opposed to. I mean, now we're even more. Yeah, we're in these four walls, and life can't even go out that much. Yeah, it's very different.
Though I suppose if we're supposed to be 200,000 years old as a more or less distinct species, and yet only 10,000 years ago started living in something that resembled a house, so we could have made ourselves a little shelter. It kind of makes you wonder what the other 190,000 years, what was going on there.
Yeah.
The
What were we
discovery
up
of a
to?
roof.
What were we doing?
Oh, by the way, it wasn't inventing the wheel that counted. It was the axle, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, everybody had wheels. They just couldn't do anything with them without the
Yeah.
axle. Even
Loads of Goodyear tires knocking about.
some islanders, isn't it? They have coins the size of two outstretched pairs of hands, or something like 8-foot coins. I think, obviously, that came before pockets in trousers, because which kind of brings me to shopping. Anything? I've noticed a few strange things in shops, but have you noticed? I mean, this is the one time a lot of people kind of get out, so it's their moment.
Yeah.
Anybody behave strangely in the shops?
Yeah, there's been some interesting bits. For me, it's kind of more been the opposite. I'm just online shopping. I'm just constantly online shopping to pass the time. I'm buying things I don't even need to buy. I bought like 15 shirts over the past couple of months just to pass the time. I'm just making like a small couch out of all these
Really?
shirts.
And
It's
yet
kind of
you
more
only had this one tonight. Really?
Yes.
Is that Chairman Mao's early years, was it?
Yeah, well, I got a good deal on it. He was having a clear out, as most of us have been over this time. But
Robbie,
yeah,
I do get a very distinct impression that you don't mind any of this at all. Shopping online, fine. Now you've even gone, really back to. I bet if you're living at home with your mum, she's doing all the food preparation, taking care of you.
well, actually, no, quite on the contrary, because I've got a great relationship with my mum, but when I'm not working, if I have and obviously hours have been carved down a lot more at the shop because there's a lot less commuters, and so there's just a lot less business knocking about. So I find I'm having a lot more time at home. I really enjoy centering my whole day around what I'm going to make for dinner, because it gives you like a task. It gives you like a purpose for the day. You're not just sat there watching telly or watching Netflix or something like that. I go, I'm make that tonight, and then have a good few hours prep. So I actually quite enjoy it. I found it's good for my sanity, to be honest. And
well, okay. So are you following any? Who are your guiding lights? The cooks, the TV chefs that you go by?
It's more like pulling out the old book that was on the shelf. I think Jamie got a good airing the other day. Jamie Oliver.
Yeah. He's quick.
Yeah, exactly. Though he did ruin turkey Twizzlers for me. I was one of the only people that sustained myself quite well on turkey Twizzlers for a good 10 years. And then he went round the school dinners and completely knocked those on the head. So it's
why? What did he say about them?
It was do you remember that campaign where he went round and it was about school dinners?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, kids weren't being fed properly, and his main target was turkey Twizzlers. And I love the turkey fries. I'm going to be straight with you, David, mate. I actually really enjoyed it. I really love that rubbish, like kind of back of the freezer, ropey.
What's in them anyway?
Oh, you know, bit of asbestos, some rat poison.
You got no idea. Yeah, they do say.
I don't bother reading it. I don't want to torture it. Don't want to torture myself. No.
I do know that in school dinners, there are things that are purportedly something are in fact not. Like a chicken nugget, if you pull one apart, it's got a spongy interior.
Yeah.
So it's foamed chicken. I believe the chickens are lured in there on some pretext that's of interest to chickens. The door is sealed, explosives are used, then a hose, a lot of filtration, and something. I used to do a bit of baking commercially, and we had a thing called instant gelate, and that was to make the insides of pies and apple strudels kind of hold themselves together. I feel in the chicken nugget game, after the hosing down process, the instant gelate gets quite a good serving to bring it together. That's probably what made it so poisonous. But
probably. Have you heard? I saw a couple of links on YouTube a while back about showing how food from commercials is made. You know, like when they show like a pizza advert, and you've got like a hand will take like a delicious slice, and you've got all the stringy cheese and all that caper.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, and apparently the way they do that is they'll like nail a pizza to like a table or the board, whatever it is.
Okay.
And then they'll mix like the slice. They'll put like excess PVA glue and lots of stuff like that. So that when you pull it out, it looks all stringy and lovely and delicious. And actually, it's probably doesn't taste too dissimilar to your chicken factory that you were just so eloquently talking about.
I suppose so. It depends how much fakery you're willing to do, which is nothing in advertising. It was one of my first jobs. And the Mars bars that we had for close-ups were completely manufactured out of various kinds of plasticides, foam and whatnot. That way, when they were cut and you see the little oozy blob of caramel just wanting to come out, but staying there, like a pert breast or something like that, or just welcoming. And then what was the next layer? Some kind of marshmallowy thing, isn't it? I can't eat one. I go into immediately a sugar rush.
PTSD from it, flashbacks. I'm not surprised.
It was too much. I had noticed a couple of things while shopping that were different. Shoplifters are more blatant, less prepared. They just don't have big coats with ginormous pockets or anything, and don't really mind doing it in front of people. They probably worked out that for the staff to arrest them or stop them, the next bit is in one of those tiny rooms they have in the supermarkets to hold people, which are usually windowless and airless. So the staff are not going to do it. They don't want to do it. They want to know.
Right.
So I noticed the sign saying, these things are all tagged up and getting bigger, but a complete absence of our radio frequency stickers. Now, I bring this up because some guy who's pretty casual was just putting things into a zip-up bag, like pretty mild kind of Marmite and some other stuff, spaghetti sauces and things. But a woman watching it, she took real exception to this. Are you going to pay for those? She said. He just kind of shrugged. And she looked around for support. I mean, this was the one moment out. We were all obeying the rules. We were wearing the appropriate masks, and that was the thing. Most thieves, you'd think, oh, great, I've got, must wear a mask. That takes care of the surveillance cameras. He didn't even give a toss. He even drew attention to him. And she was running around trying to, get staff support to do something. And they saw what was going on and headed the other direction, didn't want to
Yeah.
Firstly, if somebody's stealing food, I find it hard to get too upset about that anyway. But, I mean, why do you think she was so knotted up?
I don't know. It's quite a strange one, because also I kind of think in the world where millions of crimes are taking place, I think Tesco or Waitrose losing a couple of cans of beans is not the biggest injustice in the world.
I think she was perhaps. It was this sense that she was being extra scrupulous and obeying the distancing rules and here was somebody who was just taking advantage of everything and that's what she had a kid and he was getting a couple of quick life lessons. Little Johnny, this is a bad man. And he's being very naughty and the police will come and lock him up. None of which was happening. And little Johnny was taking it in all right. He was thinking to himself, yeah, come the end of the world, do what you like. That's the lesson today.
Just slightly misplaced, like the anger being slightly misplaced.
But speaking of people doing what they like, kinda, or tweeting what they like, has any of the Trump saga caught your attention, held your attention for anything?
I've found the last 4 years most fascinating. I've always been fascinated by the Americans just because it's very strange. They look like us. They speak the same language as us, but they're nothing like us on the whole. I found them very we have more in common with like the Dutch or the French, and which is odd in itself. But I've always found that really fascinating, and I think because they look and sound and speak the same language, I think we think they should be more like us, and they're fundamentally not. I've looked on with a strange sense of bewilderment over what's gone on with the American political system over, say, the last 5 or so years, ever since he started running, 5-6 years. It was just fascinating, especially what happened in the final throes of his tenure with the whole Capitol building getting stormed, which was just nuts. I was sat on the sofa watching that with my mum going, is this actually happening?
Why do you think the police held back?
Well, I mean, for a start, I mean, when you look at what happened with Black Lives Matter, like not too long ago, and you had people marching and then some people getting out of hand and things like that, and how like kind of swift and vigorous their suppression of that was and how violent that was, and yet you've got these people who were storming the Capitol building and there was no, like, it's amazing more people didn't die. Do you know what I mean? And I did think, that right there is a summary of the racial, like, kind of inequality of what's going on in the States. Can you imagine if that was Black Lives Matter storming the Capitol building? It would have been a bloodbath.
Pretty much. I think if there'd been a lot of black guys down there, probably some unseen force that must exist, but we just don't get to hear about it. Some adjunct to the Secret Service, which is protecting all of this. They must have reserves that only go directly to protecting, the upper echelon, and no doubt they would come out. Even if you look back to who was it? The guy's name was it? I've got my assassins wrong. Was it Hinckley who shot Reagan, or who shot Lennon? Oh, God, you'd think I'd know all these nutters. But anyway,
a small little black book with them drawn up. Yeah.
They get plenty of fan mail, I'm told.
Yeah.
And marriage proposals all over the place. And now, I mean, even I was astonished to find in prisons that your rapist is never short of a girlfriend in a jail. He gets lots of letters and women wanting to see him. I mean, figure that one out.
That's a complex. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was there was that storming by kind of Daniel Boone wannabes, or look, I suppose that makes it the authentic American, really, of old style values to look like a frontiersman of some kind with a coonskin cap or whatever. But
what did you make of it then? It was
well, look,
Trump
the
Rambo
whole
flags and all that caper.
people, a lot of my friends who are very, especially Americans, almost apologized for Trump and said, "Oh, you know," I said, "No, look, this is the best political TV I've seen in a long time. Whatever you do, vote him back in. I want the full slice, 8 years of this, because who knows when he's in his second term and he has no more elections to have to, cozy up to the voting populace. He can do what he damn well likes. I mean, within limits.
Well, you say within limits. I mean, he kind of went about as far as he could go, and it's still not, the impeachment trials, they've not come to a conclusion or anything. So,
well, my bet is that it'll go nowhere. It had the look of, I happened to be up at midnight or whenever it was that the Senate group go over to start the proceedings for the impeachment. And it was the same area of the storming, that circular hall. And it was all dark and they were all masked. And it looked very much like some recreation of a medieval witch trial, or there used to be Henry VII had a star chamber. It was kind of like the trials I've been in. You don't really have any representation, and that which you do, you would have been better off without. And it's just a Russian or Chinese court. It's degrees of how guilty you are. That's all it was. And it had that kind of morbid look. I don't think they'll want to. The Republican, they need, 17 Republicans to join the mob to. And I'm not even sure whether legally, because he's not in president any longer, whether this impeachment tool is the right device to do anything.
Yeah, I think what they because I think that was what Senator Rand Paul, that was what he said. He was like, well, technically what we're doing now is trying a private citizen, so therefore that's why I push forward the notion of cancelling the impeachment. But I think the main reason why they're doing it is, as well as to cut off his presidential pension, it means he can never run again for office. So in that respect, I get the logic of doing it, because he doesn't follow any of the rules. So he's already.
But don't you think every so often, look, all presidents have an effective limit in their powers. The same. I mean, our prime minister has more limitations. He can't make executive orders, or he can, but he has to call them something else. And there are, look, I'll bet there's parts of our lockdown enforcement law that wouldn't stand up terribly well in an appeal court. Where is it that there was any act of parliament that said you can stop somebody wandering about the place as they see fit? Of course, we don't have a constitution. We don't have a Bill of Rights. And in fact, when you scrape it away, we don't have anything much, do we, Robbie? I mean,
no, I suppose we just have. I suppose the one thing we have here that they don't have is like quite a rich history. I think there's so much to us over here, and obviously our colonial past, that. But there's a lot of history and a lot of time. And I was chatting to maybe about a year ago, chatting to a friend of mine, and he said his theory was, a very intelligent guy, and one of his theories was, he reckons because they've got very little history in terms of like actual time, they cling on to a lot of these things that are fairly in the recent past, and like don't want to let them go, because it's like, it's my heritage, it's mine. The sense of, I think, patriotism over there is so fierce, and it's something we've a lot of people, I mean, obviously you still get pockets of it, but I'd say overall we're not overly patriotic or nationalistic over here, but over there I think they have it so much that they're clinging to a lot of these things, and any sense of going against any of those amendments. So the whole point of a amendment is that it's amendable. So
Yes.
I find that quite funny. I find
Yeah.
and
all the important ones are amendments, aren't they? The Bill of
Yeah.
Rights is an amendment, and
yeah, it's exactly. And,
so because they're they don't have much history as such, and their traditions are, somebody's granddad can remember a few of them. Then it somehow takes on an exaggerated importance. Is that what you're saying, really?
Yeah, I think it's a theory. Yeah, it's just they're just clinging on to things. Yeah, it feels like there's more of a clinging on to these bygone things that aren't that. I think in the grand scheme of things, like not that important in terms of like willing to die for. When it's something we should all kind of go, you know what, that was actually a bad part of history. We should either put this in a museum, or like the statues, for example. People are clinging on to these statues of old slavers. And they go, no, this is part of our heritage. I mean, obviously it's an important issue, but I mean, they're clinging to the physical embodiment of the statue, as opposed to going, no, actually this is really wrong and represents a really dark side of our history, which oppressed a lot of people, and maybe they don't want to walk past that on a daily basis. But instead of having that sort of coming to that logical conclusion, it's a lot more of like, no, this was
I think it depends how close you are to something, doesn't it? Okay, part of being British is never to take anything seriously, never to say what you actually mean, and use a special code between your own group. It used to be class, but it's not really class anymore, but the strands within society that have their own little code terms, not just millennials, but also, I mean, some of the people, the wealthier houses that I go to, clients to put in some elaborate CCTV thing or something like that, they will have a sort of their own coded language, and you have to really grow up here to understand it. There'll be the woman of the house, who's the boss really, she'll be to an outsider, she seems very friendly to a tradesman. She might say to me, yes, we used to have John do everything around the place, but we heard good things about you. So, but it's really belittling you, but it's all first names. It's, would care for something to eat? I make some rather good little niblets. Yeah, sure, yeah. But all those bits of coded things are not, because we all know our history's a bunch of lies, and we rewarded the biggest thief going, or the biggest pirate. I mean, look at Drake. He sailed the world and robbed so much. The ship had to be thrown, all the ballast rocks had to go, and all the gold and silver just jammed in. And when he got back, he was knighted, but the whole thing was kept a secret, so Spain wouldn't think they got robbed outright. And this sort of two-stranded way of behaving, because empire was more a chess game, a trickery. When I forget the guy's name, but as India was being taken princedom by state, somebody from the guy who took Sindh province wrote back to the king, Peccavi, which is Latin for I have sinned, SINNED. So it was kind of, I should be praised for having conned all of these people out of all of their territory. And then the next step was to make them feel inferior, and icing on the cake, send their children to English schools to be buggered and beaten, and made feel completely, utterly inferior, and yet want to emulate us. So it was not. It didn't require the expense that a lot of other conquests did. So with that kind of background, I don't think other countries. You go to New Zealand, white South Africa in the old days, Australia. They all kind of think that there's a particular specialness about their cultural thing, and it's very young. Nothing.
Yeah.
And when people, don't you think when people go on about some kind of cultural heritage, it's utterly irrelevant?
Yeah, well, once again, talking as a British guy, on the most part, yes. Like I love being the Cockney boy. I'm very proud of that aspect. But yes, I think the moment one puts too much weight in that basket, then it's I think you're always setting yourself up for a fall. Because the fact is, if you're a nice person from a certain place, then the fact that you're a nice person matters. The same way if you're from somewhere and you're an arsehole, well, you're an arsehole. Chances are, irregardless of
Yeah.
That's too much emphasis is put on that. But with my, I find myself when I've kind of the various places I've been in the world, I always get on with people on a person to person level. But you do occasionally find yourself not having to. Never like having to explain Britain's actions, but you do kind of occasionally have to go, oh yeah, no, I'm actually not for a lot of that shit, because they go, oh yes.
Well,
okay.
When the Danes and Vikings came over, so we've got a lot of them in us, haven't we?
Yeah.
Whatever they were at the time. In fact, do you think, Robbie, I was thinking that we could start a kind of thing where we start to press for our Viking heritage, because personally it means a lot to me. Sure, it meant going to other places and pillaging, looting. I'll forego the rape because of modern sensibilities, but otherwise,
bit of raping, nothing about it.
Don't you think we're entitled to a Viking heritage, to carry a broadsword and take what we will?
I mean, I think there's definitely like I think it happened so long as well, but there is like kind of an inbuilt sexiness to like the myth of it, isn't there? Like the colour, the big beards, the burliness, the horned hats. I've actually got a faux Viking hat over there. Funnily enough, slightly out of arm's reach. But
what are you a Game of Thrones fan, were you?
I was actually. The hat was different. When my dad went to Denmark, he brought back the Viking hat. Actually, I might just one second.
Oh, look, it's what you've teased everybody. So
I've teased it so much. I feel I now need to. Here we go. Actually, this was not even planned. This was not even brought up.
No.
So,
sorry to say, it's slightly disappointing. I was expecting something with some fur and dragon's teeth, perhaps.
Well, I'm just surprised I didn't realise they had plastic like a couple of 1,000 years old. I thought plastic.
No, they were ahead. They were ahead of everybody. They're often.
I've been told it's genuinely authentic. It's made out of plastic, and yeah.
Yeah, and they did get further than people take credit for. You'll see made in China there, and that's not modern China. That's way back. That's a Ming Dynasty Viking hat.
Yeah, I have heard actually that a fact about Vikings. Apparently, the only reason we have mice, or the reason like mice are so prevalent throughout the world, is because apparently from Viking ships. Apparently, from the amount of food they'd have on their ships, because they originated in Scandinavia, the mice, and apparently because of the amount of food they would have to have on ships for a long weekend pillaging, mice then went on the ships. The ships then went to other shores. The mice then came off the ships, and apparently that's how the common mouse is.
Well, that's good to know, and a very timely story, because the plague. the oldest of the plagues that we know about, including the one that what was it? The diarist Samuel Pepys wrote about in London. This goes back to it was transmitted by the fleas on rats, and those rats were moved around by ship. So, it was the ships from Asia, or that had Asian goods on them. And I suppose when two ships docked, say they were in, I don't know, Egypt or something, and one had been from Asia and one was leaving Egypt, the rats would get together and have a little chat, swap fleas, and, talk about the things they'd seen. And what are those Chinese rats like, you old devil? You can imagine they're very raunchy talk amongst a rat. But it did actually kill a third of, was it 2/3? I mean, it was huge number of people. Nothing like this. And I know, although I've noticed, and perhaps you have, that what are they? Oh yeah, the virus deniers, the ones used to march saying it's all a hoax. They've gone a bit quiet the last few weeks.
Fascinating chaps, yeah. It's quite an odd one. It was actually a friend of a friend when they when we had that initial break between lockdowns, and I met up with a couple of friends in the park to have a beer when we were allowed to do that. And there was a friend of a friend. I'd not met him much before, maybe once or twice. He was full on the denier bandwagon, and not only that, he was very much one of these that believe Bill Gates was not only orchestrating, but that we were getting microchips from it. I was like, wow, you were always an interesting cat. But that's
how did he explain that the microchip was somehow contained in a nanoscale, things that are within a virus inoculation? Where did the chip fit in?
Well, we didn't dwell on it long enough for that. I was more interested in what he'd been consuming to get him to this point where this was not only his opinion, but an opinion he was willing to die for. He was
really?
like this. No, you need to understand. And they're spying us. And I was like, mate, you think he works kind of doing removals or something. I'm fairly certain Bill Gates doesn't really give a monkeys about what you're up to of an evening. But it was.
Well, you're saying he really believed this nonsense?
Yeah, that was the impression I got. He was like.
You don't think he's just? I want to stand out from the crowd, and I'll take the radical opposing view.
I mean, if you want to do that, maybe wear more pink, or dye your hair or something like that. It was from my instincts told me he was fairly serious. It got to it became almost like mind numbing after a bit. When it's like, wow, I can't reason with you. I'm not even saying you have to believe everything I believe, but you're being presented with kind of really reasonable arguments as to why what you're saying is utter rhubarb. And he was just like, no, he's got caught in this echo chamber of social media, YouTube videos.
From what you're saying, like he had a bit of nose candy or something, and he was very excitable about it. But did he have that serene obsession of the Christian? That when Christians try and convince you of the or fundamentalist way. By the way, why is it you're Christian when he wants to? It sounds like somebody from an AA meeting or whatever. But why do they look at your forehead and never in your eyes? You watch when some Christian corners you next time. They never actually make direct eye contact. They're kind of staring at your forehead, and you're kind of moving to get within eye range, but it never works. It's part of their.
I'll have to look out for that next time the old Jehovah's Witnesses knock on the door. I'll have to look out for that. I've never noticed that before.
I'm always getting accosted by people who believe things. I don't know why. I've tried to avoid any kind of belief. I used to believe something in my teenage years, but I got over it.
What did you? What in terms of what like a
complete revelation for the world? No, not that kind. It was sort of hippie era or slightly post-hippie era, which was just, as teenagers we felt was not extreme enough and should pull all governments down, and you only change laws by breaking them, and everything they did, was really a generational thing. We thought that that generation was so far gone. And in fact, though, I was looking back to people who were probably already a little on the old side in Second World War. The young ones who went through that turned out to be a very good generation, looking back at them now. They were once in the 50s. Now that I think about it, my parents' generation were all drunks. I just thought that was normal. I remember at 13 or something, standing up at a dinner table saying, "You're all drinking simply to get drunk." And they all laughed and clapped and cheered. The boy's a bit slow, he'll catch on. But that, I suppose all teenagers, what were your revelatory beliefs in your teenage years?
When I first, I suppose it was a bit later than that. It was more around the age of 21 when I moved into my first flat with a couple of friends of mine, and they were a few years older than me. They were maybe about 27, and I started, and one of them was like really into science, and I'd had such a rough, like kind of East London comp education that things like science were not remotely on my radar, because all they'd teach us, all they'd say would be like, copy out the periodic table, and there was no like romance to it. There was no like.
You didn't have an inspirational teacher, I
guess. No, not in science. I had a few, other ones dotted around, but there was no like kind of looking at your place in the universe or anything to do with that. And so when I started to fall down the rabbit hole of science through my flatmate, that really opened my eyes. And then from that, I kind of sidestepped into conspiracy theories as well. And and that, I think there's something brilliant about like a teenager / someone in their early 20s when they think they've just got a bit more figured out than you do, of course you think that, but let me tell you, because I've actually watched a handful of documentaries on this subject, so I think is that sort of thing. And,
I've got sections of Reader's Digest underlined because of the footnotes,
Yeah.
But do you think there's part of it that people are attracted to a conspiracy, that Gates is behind it because it's comforting? If we look at people's human fallibility, you look at anybody long enough and you'll see what a half-wit they are, and yet they're richer than we are. They are leaders. We inadvertently seem to have elected them by that cunning, Stasi-centered democracy that only gives you a choice between A and B of the same coin.
Yeah.
With the conspiracy theory, you at least have the benefit that somebody of dark but evil intelligence, key thing, intelligence has worked out a plan for the human race and what happens. And that, yes, there is huge control. I'm not walking out into a minefield of half-wits that have made poor decisions, which are going to see me poisoned in a restaurant or die through carelessness in a hospital, or administered the wrong thing. Nothing will be by chance. I mean, do you think there's a comfort in that?
I think there's that. I suppose I see it as more people that are heavily embedded into these kind of lines of thinking. It's the attractiveness of feeling like something that the masses don't. You are that bit cleverer than everyone else. Oh, well, that's what we're being told by the TV and by the news stations. But realistically, it's like this. I think it's that feeling of power from having like a higher knowledge, or you've figured the game out, Oh yeah, they set the rules, but I know what the rules are, and I can now play around the rules. And I think it's more the attractiveness of that. That's where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Yeah.
It makes me want to ask too, since it's sort of a general thing, and I'm old and and you're younger by quite a bit, I can look back at the 50s and see a bit of music, a film. It's the 50s. Same with the 60s. 70s, hear a bit of the style. I don't mean a particular record or something, but the style of it. I'll know that's 70s. We can look at 80s film, 80s hair. You know, the girls had Big Chief,
Grunge and
Big
yeah.
Chief Date No More, or whatever the Indian name was. And the 90s, yes, for about half of it, and then it kind of grunged out into a bit of a mash. And since the turn of the century, can you identify something as a noughties thing or a teens years?
Um, I
The decade, I
suppose.
mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've thought that myself. You know, when you look at like the disco of the 70s, or like the grunge of the 80s, and yeah, even 90s things. Like Nirvana, or like things like Saved by the Bell. There's very kind of 90s things, and I've thought that. I'm not sure if we don't have that for things like the noughties, and what have we just been through, like the teens or whatever
The
they be
teens,
called.
yeah.
I'm not sure if we don't have that yet because we're pretty much have only just come out of it, and so when you're in the middle of something, you don't realize quite how ridiculous you look until the fashions completely change and the music tastes change. I'm not sure if it's because we don't have a really like identifying sound, or if it's just because we're too close to it at the minute. I suppose social media and the widespread use of the internet, obviously it was around in the 90s, there wasn't really a computer or a laptop or a phone with data in every household until fairly recently. And so I suppose something like MySpace and that would really kind of signify the noughties. And a lot of gelled hair. I had gelled hair, spikes, that Stegosaurus sort of vibe where it stuck out at the back. That was very 90s when I started hitting the clubs, 17, 18, 19, and I'd use old pot of gel and I'd just cake it on and you go there.
Okay, but we can
So
look
a
to
bit of that.
Vivian Westwood's shop with Malcolm McLaren's Sedition in the King's Road, and people had spiked up hair then.
Yes. I suppose the spikes have slightly evolved somewhat, though. It's like when you had a punk spike would be fairly different to like a Romford white shoes, tight jeans sort of spike. I know which one. I'd rather hang out with the punks all day.
Yeah, I guess.
All day.
Up to it, but you wouldn't want to sleep in their bed, that's for sure. I don't know.
No, definitely not. Definitely.
I don't know. It just seems that a lot of see, I'm just talking from the old bastard's point of view, which seems everything in the noughties and the teens was more or less sieved from earlier things in a combination of styles from whatever, rather than so distinct. It might be, as you say, the speed with which information travels and images travel.
Yeah.
They don't settle because there isn't a gestation period long enough before something else takes effect. But then again, why have our phones looked like chocolate bars for 10 years straight? Whereas we went through flip phones, little bat phones, and then a kind of a folding phone.
Yeah.
And different sizes. But there's nowhere to go now, is there? People
No. It was like
Well,
the technological arms race, wasn't it? And I saw a film about Steve Jobs fairly recently, which it showed like him in different lights. It showed like his intense tech genius as well as like his slightly, I don't want to say morally bankrupt side, but I think he was so driven on the cause.
and engineers and scientists don't. I mean, they tend to stand back from the ethical side of it.
Yeah, they're about
involved. It's a disaster. So.
Exactly. Yeah, they're more about stuff as opposed to people. But it seemed like Steve Jobs was on. He was so driven to get our handheld tech to a certain space that I suppose now until the next big. I don't know what's the next big revolution. I suppose it'd be the moment they can take that technology and put it. Like Black Mirror style. Have you ever seen Black Mirror?
I've seen a few of them, but and even though some of them are, I think some of them are good, but for rather old-fashioned storytelling principles that you don't know that this whole thing's a artificial, or you don't know
Yeah.
this is really a kind of version of a prison in the future, where you're stuck in somewhere.
Yeah.
I get that every night. All of my dreams for the last 20 years been set in a prison. And
Really?
yeah, and the art director is very good because he's no slouch, I can tell you, because every night something different, different
Yeah.
designs. Sometimes it's arabesque, and sometimes it's the full brutalist Russian kind of scene, and another one I get to the tallest building, and then I realize there's a big glass dome, and the whole
Yeah.
city is a prison. There's no escaping.
Are they always COVID compliant dreams? Are the other performers always at least 2 meters from you during these?
I think I'm so busy avoiding things, and the trouble with our dreams is everything's I don't know what's the word, changeable. If you pick up a gun thinking this will get you out of trouble, it's a banana in your hand, seconds later. And the more you look at, have you ever found treasure in a dream and thought, oh, I must hang on to this, and then it
No,
keeps disappearing, changing shape, or it's really unreliable?
no. I find mostly it would be a situation that's, it could be a slightly extreme situation, but it's always kind of in my mind at the time adhered to the rules of like reality. It's not like, oh no, once I was floating away once, I remember that, so that's not strictly true. But no, I've not had the thing of picking up a thing and then it turns into another thing.
No, I suppose there's do you think the isolation of the way people live at the moment are making their dreams more intense, or stifling the imagination? I mean,
I'd say yes. It's probably even more. It's either more intense or even more intense, or just a lot more mundane. I would have thought. It seems, yeah. I
is
suppose
a
were a lot funkier, because at least then that would probably placate a lot of the boredom you have during the day. Just think back to that fun dream where you were like, joyriding, or
has your taste in what you like to watch become more critical, diverged in any way you can identify as a change? Because watch more stuff, you've become better at liking, no liking.
I find it's more difficult, David, to tell you the truth, mate, because you can, whereas before when you only had the 5 channels or then Freeview, you just go, that'll do. I'll watch that episode of
Shit, but it's
Top.
all right.
Yeah, I'll watch that episode of Top Gear that I've watched 25 times already. Yeah, sure. Whereas now, I think because we have so much of it at our fingertips, it's like, if you're not, I find with me anyway, if I'm not like grabbed by something within the first 5 minutes, if it doesn't tick every single box, then I struggle to get into stuff. So I think if anything, it's played havoc. Too much choice. I've got too much choice now.
But has it refined your choice in any way? Do you find you're watching more of a particular type of thing, or...
I suppose I watch things I feel I should watch, and I actually really enjoy learning. So I like watching things like documentaries or good dramas based on like kind of non-fictional events. But I do watch a lot of trash as well. I do enjoy trash. Some of it's
Judge Judy or something.
a bit of everything, really. Sorry, I thought my laptop was plugged in, and it's just come up saying low battery. So let me just
right.
my apologies.
Well, we'll only be around for about another 10, 15 minutes at the most, I would think. Why is there wait, when you moved the laptop, then the little webcam showed a couple of, well, there may have been boots, there could have been the feet of a dead man.
Boots or the feet of a dead man? That's
yeah. You haven't got any corpses in there.
No. Well,
I thought it might have been your Uncle Max. I mean, you're still carting around his. Did it come to a screenplay, or is it a treatment? I mean, what's the Uncle Max thing?
Oh, what?
In wartime experiences, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, the Suez Canal stuff. Yeah. It's good. To be honest, it's just very difficult to get off the ground right now. You'd think that, with everyone being in lockdown and a lot less things are getting made, everyone's got a lot more time on their hands. You think it would be easier to like corner some people to have some conversations. But yeah. For anyone that doesn't know, my great uncle Max was involved in the Suez Canal conflict, and so we are hoping to get his memoirs, documented on film somehow. We've explored the kind of documentary angle or some sort of docu-series. But yeah, it's just, we're pitching it for Channel 4.
As I understand it, you need to get commissioned by a channel or something.
It's essentially it's getting funding for it, because he's a very interesting chap, and he's got great stories. And also there's something about, a Cockney boy being plonked in in the middle of Egypt in the 50s.
Yeah.
With like no idea of at the time why he was there, just following orders. And then there was a whole back and forth, and then the Americans got involved, and then she said that was one of the reasons that crisis is one of the things that really put the kibosh on a lot of the old empires, as it was.
Well, America said you can go ahead with it. I mean, the French never listened anyway. Or you can repay your war debt or tomorrow by 3 o'clock, which I believe wasn't actually that Lend-Lease debt from Britain borrowed. It was paid back in, was it 96 or 2004? But it took a long time to pay it off.
It's quite amazing. It was really paid off. In fairness, you'd think with something like that, it'd be like a student debt where you just kind of go, yeah, I'll pay it next year, mate. I'll pay it next year. But
your mate Vladimir Putin, he paid off the last of the Russian Tsars' war debts from World War One in the 2000s. So for all their other, it seems, isn't it? Wow. I mean, countries turn on each other like rattlers and cross each other and so on. But they take pretty seriously the deals they strike, especially over money.
You don't really want to mess about with them over there either. It's a different set of rules they play by.
I know, but here it is. He was paying off the debts that the Tsar had racked up around the world from banks. I suppose if you don't do it, then people won't pay you back. So
Did you ever have many dealings over in Russia?
Yeah. I met some, strangely enough, in a Pakistan jail, some Russian guys, and I don't know what the hell, half a dozen Russians were doing there, and they'd been there for 10 years. They came from the old Soviet era. They were a Moscow street gang, and pretty ruthless. And you can imagine in the Soviet era, it might have been bad after the new generation, but you can imagine being a street scallywag robber in a full-on communist state with KGB disappearing people all over the place. You had to really stand by your thing. Andre and his gang got jailed and split up in two different state cities. I mean, their jails are so big there, they're cities, and they're called like Perm 38, which is the whole town is just a jail. And that's all it is. The civilians do the things that work there. But his real issue was not being in jail. They could all handle that. But being split up from his group. So he broke out of his bit of Siberia, went to the local commercial airport, hijacked a plane with his few of his guys, and then flew that to the other prison city, got the rest of the gang together, and by pretty ruthless means. I mean, he was lucky there was somebody on the plane they gave a shit about, because he was throwing dead bodies off it and they weren't budging, but they got to the one they wanted to keep alive. So they let the plane take off with the whole gang. But where to go? This is 1988. Where would you fly to, Robbie? You're flying in the air. You've got a bit of fuel.
You got a bit of fuel. Russia.
And Russia's still Soviet era. It's about Reaganish times.
Yeah.
And where can you go?
I don't know. I suppose what were the extradition rules with countries? But is it similar to how it is now?
When it comes to hijackers, there's not too many rules, really.
No, very true. But just in terms of thinking about, okay, well, what's the realistic outcome here? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, there might not have been one with Argentina, but I think they'd still be in trouble if they went there. No, they ended up going to General Zia al-Haq's Pakistan, who was a dictator. He'd hanged the last elected prime minister and made himself, he was, as a general, head of the country for a few years, and disliked both the Russians and the Americans. So that was the place to go. And they landed at Hyderabad because, you know how we have Stansted Airport for all our hijackings? And it's also a training place, how everybody should know, for young customs officers. So they put them on the field there and say, oh, pluck anybody you like. Yeah, it's good practice. You'll get a feel for it, spot the dodgy ones. And so people are getting nicked all the time for having too much booze and cigarettes because they get the cheap flights which come into Stansted, but it is not the place to pull a stroke because you get these young half-wits, just like a rows of them. So the Russians ended up there. Now there's two Hydeраbads, one in India, which was very much in favor of the Soviets, so they didn't want to land there, and they weren't sure which Hyderabad they were in. But they had no way of telling. They asked the first spook who came on board after they'd landed to show them his cigarettes. It's usually a thing that's locally produced. Because he was a high-ranking spook. He had imported Dunhills. It was no good. But that was settled. They went into prison and then really fought, thinking they'd have to be tough guys in an Asian prison. Well, it's not the way to play it there. It's deal-making, as you can imagine. Imagine being locked up with a whole lot of rug salesmen. But they did it the hard way, went on hunger strikes, got force-fed. Andre had these big gaps in his teeth, which I asked about, and they were missing because when you're being force-fed, to get the tube down there, they have this metal device that clamps your jaws open to push and you only get like very watery dal and all of that pushed down there. These days in the civilized world, we force-feed people with a tube up their nose. So that's nice.
It's much nicer things like quinoa and stuff like that, I suppose. A nice butternut squash soup or something, I imagine. Yeah, far more refined cuisine.
Well, we could do a cookbook, couldn't we?
We could, actually.
Force-feeding anybody this week? Well, exactly. We've got a treat in surprise for your victims.
Exactly, a guide to your first hunger strike. Yes, absolutely.
I think, anyway, I just to end on the Russians, I kept in touch with people like these, you can imagine. I tried to get Andre, when he was being sent back to Russia, a couple of big slabs of meat arrived for him, but he didn't have some papers. And they had to go away. So before they came back, we were trying to get him a passport. And while we were inside the prison, it was a real job. Another couple of weeks, he would have been a free man. But anyway, I was thinking that we're going to finish in a few minutes, but I think we should really set we're kind of strayed all over the place here a bit, Robbie. We're supposed to be giving useful advice and up-to-the-minute reports on the lockdown tapes, which is the name of this because we know things that other people don't. But I don't know that there is one, but perhaps we should have, think about it for next time, a microwave cookbook, since you can't get out. I mean, I bet there's some tips you've learned over the years about 30 seconds in one moment, come back to it, stir it, put it in again, another 30 seconds.
Yeah. Always pierce the plastic film. You don't want it exploding.
That's true. Except some things, those little steam puddings, a tiny pinprick. Yeah. And so it bubbles up and it kind of gives it another steam cook. I think there's a lot of microwave wisdom contained in the Robbie Strong mind that's just ready to bubble to
Yeah,
the surface.
this is definitely
And
a subject I will plumb the depths of. Yes.
and I think too, we need to know what the things are creeping up on people that they don't know is happening to them. I've seen it in the kind of the illusions people have being fortified and made strong by this massive YouTube-ish selection of rubbish to watch, including those watching at this very moment. um, so we need to offer a way out of that. We should do that. And I think your observations on that. Travel at any public transport. I mean, they're empty, aren't they? The trains. So what do you need to know?
I mean, they were fairly empty, and now it seems much like, after the first lockdown, people have got back into the habit of traveling. And I saw, yeah, I've seen various footage and stuff today of trains being fairly packed, and they're not really being a protocol, and there's no like enforcement of the mask thing or anything. There's now, it says, we dish out this many fines. I've never seen anyone be stopped for not wearing them. I mean, I wear it for politeness as well as for my own, peace of mind. I kind of do it for politeness because I know there's a lot of anxious people out there. But some of the trains are a lot more packed I don't know about different parts of the country, but in London anyway.
What do you think is the police have hit a couple of parties? One was they always call it a rave. Who the hell knows what it was?
Yeah.
And another one, was it a wedding or a birth? I think it was a wedding celebration at some school in the Jewish community. It was too a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, okay. I've not heard about that. I heard about the Hackney rave, but yeah. So
150 people at this within a large family group in one of the Jewish faith schools. I mean, that's a weird little thing, faith school. What the hell?
Yeah.
Well, they sort of draw a line over, the creationist crap.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's got its interesting points. In a Jewish community, so you can do certain things on the Sabbath, they run a wire around the area, and across the wire you can't do certain things, and across the wire you can because it's designated whatever. I don't know. They seem to be more affected. What can I say? The groups that are very community-minded tend to get hit or affected by the virus worse.
Yeah.
Is there like that silly catch-all BAME? It covers so many people. It means nothing in itself.
Essentially, it's everyone that's not white English, as I understand it. I think BAME, BAME.
I didn't even know there was any white English left anywhere.
I am but a mirage. Yes, I'm just an algorithm. Maybe that's the answer. We've come full circle in your question. You were saying about, have you seen people go slightly round the bend? Maybe you are just sat here looking into a mirror, talking to yourself, David, and I am not even a real person.
That is one side to look at it. Or alternatively, you're living a simulation, and for some reason, your simulator writers have included a character called David, who will mention this very thing at this moment.
Could well be.
It will be. All right, we shall try to be a little more focused when next time, and nonetheless, perhaps people enjoy it when it's a shotgun rather than a sniper's rifle. All right then, don't stay safe, get yourself in trouble, and breathe in the rich air of those things that make you stronger if they don't kill you. And we'll see all of you again, depending on various things, but you can't kill us. No. Only the good die young. All right, people. We'll see you soon. Bye. Click. Well, interesting, but a little unfocused. And I think I'll trim it to an hour next time and try and give you something useful. How's it going? Let me know.